You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? I'm BJ Kissel, and this is another episode of 10 Things presented by our friends at KC Strength and Conditioning. If you've got somebody you know, ages 8 to 18, that play baseball or softball in the Kansas City area, you might consider KC Strength and Conditioning as a place to improve their performance. I've known John Renzi, the owner over there, for more than 20 years. We played baseball together growing up, and he's always been the guy when it comes to fitness and what a body needs to maximize its performance that I would go to get information or whatever it was. John has been that guy, again, for more than 2 decades. Call John Renzi over at 913-638-8960 to get more information and maybe even drop by their new facility up near Mill Valley. Again, that's KC Strength and Conditioning. All right, Chiefs Kingdom. I don't know about you guys. I'm still not quite over the game from last night. It was a roller coaster of emotions in so many different ways. But at the end of the day, the Chiefs did pick up that victory. They moved to 4-1 on the season, and now they can set their sights on a huge showdown against the Buffalo Bills coming up this Sunday, one of the marquee games in the NFL schedule when that was released back in May. But before we get to the Buffalo Bills game, we're going to go through 10 things that really stood out and records that were broken, superlatives, things like that. If you've listened to this show, you know what it's about. Trying to get to the meat, trying to get you guys some nuggets about what took place from that game. A lot of this came from either social media, and I'll let you know where I got that, or from Chiefs Communications and their game notes after the game. There's always some really good stuff in there. And when you've got guys like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey's got a big one in this episode, then you know you're going to have your work cut out for you if you're in charge of coming up with all the records and keeping pace with everything that they've been doing on the field. So let's start with number 1, and this is per Opta Stats on Twitter. On Monday night, the Raiders had a 150-yard rusher in Josh Jacobs. They had a 100-yard receiver in Devontae Adams. They had no turnovers. They had no more than 2 punts. And again, according to Opta Stats, they're the first team in NFL history to do all 4 of those things, but still lose. Again, 150-yard rusher, 100-yard receiver. They did not turn the ball over, despite Chris Jones' sack, strip, fumble recovery that was called a roughing the passer call that you've probably heard nothing but that discussion about that over the last 24 hours and will continue for the next several days as everybody around the NFL is going to chime in their opinions. Even people that weren't playing in that game that play in the NFL were sharing their opinions, from Josh Allen earlier today on Kyle Brandt's Basement to Micah Parsons tweeting about it, to former NFL head coach Sean Payton tweeting about it. I mean, there were a lot of people that kind of seem to have the similar idea about what roughing the passer should look like and what it shouldn't look like. But again, Chiefs first team in NFL history, I guess, to beat a team that had a 150-yard rusher, a 100-yard receiver, no turnovers, and no more than 2 punts. Now, moving on to number 2, and this is the first of 3 in a row that are going to be dedicated to Travis Kelsey. Again, this is courtesy of the Chiefs Communications Department, but Travis Kelsey caught a team-high 7 passes for just 25 yards with 4 touchdowns in Monday night's game. It marks Kelsey's first career regular season 4-touchdown game. The performance against the Raiders ties the franchise record for the most receiving touchdowns in a game, joining running back Jamal Charles, who did that at Oakland. I think a lot of us remember that game. That was on December 15th, 2013. And then I don't remember this one because it was a little before my time, but wide receiver Frank Jackson at San Diego on December 13th, 1964. And those are the only 3 players in franchise history with 4 scoring receptions in a single game. It marks Kelsey's 9th career multi-touchdown game and the first game with more than 2 receiving touchdowns. All right, moving on to number 3, also Travis Kelsey. He becomes the 4th tight end in NFL history with at least 4 receiving touchdowns in one game, tying the second most grabs in a single game in NFL history. Only former Chargers tight end Kellen Winslow Sr. owns more with 5. Kelsey becomes the first player to record 4 receiving touchdowns in a single game since wide receiver Marvin Jones Jr. had 4 scoring grabs as a member of the Detroit Lions back on October 20th, 2019. I did see a nugget also that Kelsey had the fewest receiving yards for any player that had 4 touchdowns, and then Marvin Jones was in second place, and Marvin Jones had 92 yards to go along with his 4 touchdowns, where Kelsey, again, kind of laughably at this point, one of the most memorable games of his career, and he finished with 7 catches for 25 yards. But again, 4 of those coming inside the end zone. And I believe, according to Next Gen Stats, 3 of those came on the exact same route, with that over route inside the end zone in the red zone. So big time performance from Kelsey. And number 4, also Travis Kelsey, as he continues his hot streak of consecutive games with a reception with his catch in the first quarter of Monday night's game against the Las Vegas Raiders. Kelsey now extends his streak to 131 consecutive games with at least 1 catch. Now, that reception tied him with Pro Football Hall of Fame tight end Tony Gonzalez for the most consecutive games with a pass reception in franchise history. And among active players, the reception keeps him in second place behind Cardinals wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, who is still serving his suspension. All right, moving on to number 5. This is per Next Gen Stats. This is a fun one. Also Travis Kelsey, but he traveled 52.7 yards from snap to score on his 8-yard touchdown from Patrick Mahomes. And that was the most distance traveled on a touchdown play under 10 yards since Mitchell Trubisky in week 7 of 2018. And he traveled 71.9 yards. I have to go back and watch that highlight. But again, Travis Kelsey went 52.7 yards on his 8-yard touchdown reception from Mahomes. If you remember that one, it's where he came back across the middle of the field, broke a few tackles, and then dove into the end zone. Huge play and huge performance, obviously, from Travis Kelsey. And moving along, this one, you're going to have mixed reviews on this one, but Matthew Wright, the kicker, set a Chiefs franchise record for longest field goal by nailing a 59-yard field goal at the end of the second quarter in Monday night's game. And that passed the 58-yard field goals that had previously held the top mark in franchise history, 2 by Nick Lowry and 1 by Harrison Butker. And that field goal was a career long for Wright and marked his 5th career 50-plus yard field goal made. He had not attempted a 50-plus yard field goal since November 14th of last season, when he went 1 of 2 from 50-plus yards as a member of the Jacksonville Jaguars. A lot of people are going to remember the performance because of the 2 missed kicks that would have kind of changed things towards the end. But you got to give credit where it's due. The fact that he hit that 59-yarder at the time that it happened, believed it made it 20-10 going into halftime when the Chiefs got the ball to start the second half. And things started to click for the Chiefs offense in the second half. But big time performance, or I guess I should say big time kick in that one situation from Matthew Wright. You hate to see him missing the other 2. Hopefully, I think it's obvious at this point, but hopefully Harrison Butker is making progress with that ankle, because when you go up against the Buffalo Bills, you can't leave points on the board. They're going to need all the help they can get. And the fact that you look at the DraftKings line, the Chiefs are actually underdogs. They are getting 3 points against the Buffalo Bills at home. And so if you follow betting and know the fact that normally home teams get 3 points, the fact that they're underdogs by 3 means Vegas thinks that the Bills are 6 points better than the Chiefs, which is really something to say. They've played better overall than the Chiefs have, but it's still interesting, and will probably be a storyline as we get close to the game. It'll be interesting to see if that line changes, to see where people are putting their money. But Buffalo has absolutely looked dominant in several of their performances outside of that one, loss to the Miami Dolphins.
Hey, sorry to interrupt today's podcast, but I have to tell you about a couple of our sponsors. First one being Liquid Death. You've heard us talk about this company all the time here on Kansas City Sports Network. Here at KCSN, we love Liquid Death, and when I'm looking through the bottled water section of my local store, and I say, oh, what are those strange tall boys up there? I know it's Liquid Death, and you might look at it and be like, wait, what is that up there? Kind of rad-looking cans. It's Liquid Death. And it's spring water from the Alps. It's not beer, and it is called Liquid Death. Yeah, that name jumps off the can. The can design, everything. I would show you a can, but I don't have one because I've drank all of them. I've drank everything that they've given me at Liquid Death because it's so delicious, because it absolutely murders your thirst. That's why it's called Liquid Death. It murders your thirst. And not only does it murder your thirst, but it brings death to plastic bottles. I hate plastic pollution. You hate plastic pollution. Their infinitely recyclable tall boy aluminum cans help bring death to that as well, that pollution. And they donate 10% of their profits to help kill plastic pollution. Another good thing about the folks over at Liquid Death. And let me tell you, they've got, I believe, 4 different flavors that you can get. No, 5 if you talk about their flavored sparkling waters. They've got a berry, they've got a mango, they've got a lime. All of them are very good. As a guy who drinks sparkling water myself, love the Liquid Death versions of them. Make sure you go check those out. They have just a still water, which is the water from the Alps. Kind of weird to be drinking out of a can, but it feels good to be drinking out of a can because you're doing good for the environment. And they also have just a regular sparkling water if you want to add it to your mixed drinks. Maybe have it be a little bit of a beverage mixer you could have there with your Liquid Death. But they've got all kinds of things, and you can go find it at your local Woodman's, 7-Eleven, Roundy's, or Hy-Vee. Or here's what you can do. You can go and find a Liquid Death retailer near you using code KCSN. That's liquiddeath.com/KCSN. Go to that website, find a Liquid Death retailer near you. That's liquiddeath.com/KCSN.
Speaking of the field goals and, the Chiefs getting bailed out on one because of the missed field goal, they got called back by Matthew Wright and gave him that first down. But according to the Associated Press, the last time any team in the NFL got flagged for defensive holding on a field goal came back in 2015. It was the tweet from James Palmer of NFL Network, friend of KC Sports Network, but he had gotten it from the Associated Press. But what's interesting about that defensive holding call that came back in 2015, it was also the Raiders, and the referee was the same referee from Monday night, Carl Cheffers, a name that Chiefs fans are going to become very familiar with, as everybody is talking about, much like the forward progress call from back in the day that I still think is the worst call in Chiefs franchise history, with Derek Johnson spearing Marcus Mariota in the playoff game against the Titans. That was called not a fumble or a sack, and that it was forward progress was called. So that one was a tough one. But let's move on to number 7, and that is Patrick Mahomes. Finished the game on Monday night with 29 completions on 43 passes for 292 yards with 4 touchdowns and no interceptions. That's good for a 117.6 passer rating. It marks Mahomes' 15th career game with 4 or more touchdown passes. Remember, he's 27 years old. He owns a 13-2 record in games with 4 or more touchdown throws, and 10 of those contests with 4 or more touchdown passes, including Monday night's game, Mahomes did not throw an interception. Right now, Mahomes has 15 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions on the season, and that marked Mahomes' 39th career regular season game with 100 or better passer rating, extending his franchise lead already. He now owns 166 career touchdown passes, while his 15 touchdowns thrown so far this season leads all quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think everybody at this point, if you follow on social media, knows that the 166 career touchdown passes put him past Troy Aikman, who was calling the game last night for ESPN with Joe Buck. But interesting, they did not bring that stat up during the broadcast. But congratulations to Patrick Mahomes. Continues to just move on up the record books in every way that you look at it. And again, said it a couple times already, but shout out to the Chiefs communication staff for staying up to date and on top of all of these records and all of these stats, because it's a lot and it cannot be easy to continuously stay like I said, up to date on how many different things the Chiefs have going on. And to correct myself from earlier, Matthew Wright did finish the game 1 of 2 on field goal attempts, with the one that he did miss getting called back because of the holding call that we just mentioned, that the Associated Press had said that a defensive holding call on a field goal had not happened since 2015. Again, also Carl Cheffers. Moving on to number 8, wide receiver Marquez Valdez Scantling had a lot to celebrate on Monday night. Along with turning 28 years old, Valdez Scantling recorded 6 receptions on 8 targets for 90 yards. His 6 receptions for 90 yards both marked single game bests for MVS since joining the Chiefs earlier this offseason. Now, I think if you followed any of our content this week, there was, prognostications that it would be it was setting up for a good game for at least one of the Chiefs wide receivers, based on going up against the Raiders and then not necessarily defensively having the defensive backfields or the ability to shut down passing games like the teams that the Chiefs had already played. And so it was nice to see MVS make some big time plays. And not only was the 6 receptions on 90 yards look good in the box score. Those came in some really big situations, especially in the second half. The Chiefs offensive line did a much better job of giving Patrick Mahomes time, kind of containing Chandler Jones and Max Crosby a little bit. A lot of that had to do with Travis Kelsey and what he was able to do. They were actually having to move Max Crosby out to try and chip or slow down Travis Kelsey in some kind of way before he went into his route, which obviously was going to slow down Max Crosby getting into his pass rush move. So it all works together, but shout out to the Chiefs offensive line for giving Patrick Mahomes time, and for MVS and Juju Smith-Schuster. And we saw Sky Moore make some plays at the end of the game to kind of close things out. Kind of felt like the closer in that point. If you're watching our post-game show with Kent Swanson, Craig Stout, and Maddie Lane, they were talking about that afterwards. But moving on to number 9, rookie George Karlaftis, who hadn't recorded a sack before Monday night's game, but you'd be hard pressed to find anybody that said they hadn't been impressed with what the rookie had done through the first 3 games of his career. But he got the first sack of his career in the first quarter of Monday night's game against the Raiders, teaming up with Frank Clark to take down Derek Carr for a loss of 7 yards. Karlaftis recorded 1 tackle and 1 quarterback pressure in addition to the half sack that he picked up in that game. And that brought his tackle total to 10 on the season for, again, the Chiefs rookie first-round draft pick edge rusher George Karlaftis. And number 10, linebacker Darius Harris recorded his first career sack, dropping Derek Carr for an 11-yard loss. And in addition to that sack, Harris led the Chiefs with 10 tackles, 8 of which were solo, including 1 tackle for loss and 1 quarterback pressure to help the defense. We didn't talk about Nick Bolton, but you can't talk about that game and not some of the big defensive plays that we saw from Nick Bolton. Seems like everybody at some point made a play here or there, even though it wasn't the best game for the Chiefs, but especially some of the big pass plays to Devontae Adams, some of the pass interference calls early in the game, depending upon how you feel about those. I know lots can be made about what the refs did and how it all played out, but not a great start for the Chiefs. They got down 17-0 in this game, but it became the biggest comeback in Patrick Mahomes' young career in a regular season game. He'd overcome a 17-point deficit against the Texans in that divisional playoff game couple years ago en route to the Super Bowl. But a lot's been made of. I think Patrick Mahomes is now 12-9 in games in which he trailed by 10 points at some point. He has a winning record when trailing by 10 points, which no other quarterback currently in the NFL had even close to a 500 record, let alone an above 500 record when facing those kinds of things. So shout out to the Chiefs, obviously moving to 4-1 on the season and standing atop the AFC West through the first quarter, a little bit more than a quarter of the season now that we've got 17 regular season games, but a big one coming up on Sunday. We'll have plenty more content at KC Sports Network for you, whether it's the KC Laboratory, Craig, Maddie, and Kent, and those guys will be getting their show going tonight, Tuesday night. Make sure to check that out. And then don't forget to check out the breakdown with Matt Castle and Matt Hamilton, breaking down what they saw from the Chiefs offense and what that means looking forward against the Bills. We'll have Derek Johnson, all-time leading tackler for the Chiefs. We'll be back on this week with Craig Stout and Mike DeVito to break down what they saw from the Chiefs defense as well. And then, plenty more content as we get ready for that huge showdown against the Buffalo Bills. Again, we appreciate everybody for listening or watching on YouTube and supporting what we're doing here at KC Sports Network. We are just over 17 months old, and we have surpassed 2 million podcast downloads and 2 million views on YouTube. And none of that is possible without your support. So we'll keep continuing to try and create great content if you keep consuming it. Please let us know what you think about everything that we have going on. Please hit that like and subscribe button or follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you all next time.